All right, everybody, guess what? We are about ready to have a very, very, very special. No, never mind. It's just Ed, but he knows what he's talking about, and he's here to educate you. I think that's why it's called Education by Ed. Oh, yeah, by the way, it is July 29th, 2018. It is a Sunday. So now unmute Ed and let's see what he's got to say.
Anyhow, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We appreciate you. And the one thing is that I'm going to bring up one thing that we were talking about earlier, dealing with your filing a complaint. Okay? A complaint is a whining instrument, and an instrument is decided on by who you're filing the complaint on. So they get to decide if, very simple, if your case has any merit or not. It doesn't matter what you say at all. It matters who you are sending it to, and that is if it's a police department, law firm, anything like that. So I always suggest that you file the criminal charges with it, because then that way they can't sit there and say they didn't know. And that is the one thing that people need to comprehend, is that when you're filing a complaint, you have to comprehend that all you're doing is whining. When it comes down to it, it's just a wham, 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 wham. So when you file your criminal complaint, you always want to write the list of charges. You want to write the administrative rules. You want to look up the administrative rules of the corporation employees that you're filing the complaint on. And see, that's the one thing that people miss out on, that type of stuff. Because you want to file the complaint. Use their paperwork, file the paperwork, because they're going to sit there and bitch and go, well, you didn't use our paperwork. Okay. Well, and then you write a little brief subject of the complaint and their paperwork, and then you say attached affidavit of facts. So that way they can't sit there and try to get out of it. And remember, these people would whine, cry, scream, do anything they can get out of it. Because remember, they don't care about you. And that's the one thing that people have got to come to grips in reality. Because I talk to so many people, and they're like, these people are supposed to do their job. They have this job that they're supposed to be doing this job. They took a constitutional oath to do this job. Who took the constitutional oath? Do you have proof they took a constitutional oath? See, that's the one thing that people don't get. When you go down to the Secretary of State or the county clerk, you want to get a copy of their oath. And so when you get a copy of their oath, certified copy. And you want to make sure it's a certified copy that the Secretary of State or the county clerk is stating that that's their oath. And then you want to make sure that you sent a copy to yourself. You always make sure you got backup material. And I don't know why my computer all of a sudden froze up again. But you want to make sure that you have factual evidence on what the complaint is. You want to make sure that you have the evidence of what you're claiming of your evidence is of the complaint. And you want to make sure that with your evidence trail, now they might ask you for your evidence, and you don't want to give them your evidence. That is the one thing that people always screw up. They'll give them the evidence ahead of time, and so you're not in a court. And so you don't want to have it done by a judge, because the judge doesn't work for you. The judge works for Article 1, Section, the legislative branch of the government, so the Public Employees Union. So remember, these men and women are doing this deliberately for their own personal and financial gain. And once you start putting those pieces together, and they're going to bullshit you. I've had some of these people, plead with me. Oh, Ed, come on, you know this and you know that, and why would you want to go this far? Because when they violate their public service and oath of office, it is apparently we have to go this far. And so it depends on the complaint you are filing and the affidavit you are filing. And remember, you are liable for everything you say. And that's the one thing that most people forget. You know, and I've heard people that complain because all of a sudden they got attacked or hit up on something. And it's like, don't you get what you did? You know, I mean, you have to be 100% honest and factual in your affidavits. You cannot assume, presumption. You know, you have to have it 100% facts of what happened. The one thing I do suggest to people is when you have conversations with these elected and public servants, write it down. The time you talk to them, put a file. You know, if you don't have a file cabinet or something like that, get them in envelopes and put them in the envelopes and label the envelopes. Because in that way, when you start talking and you have evidence like that, it's very simple, because then they can't sit there and try to come back and say, well, I don't remember talking to you. Well, I have the date and time that we talked. Isn't this the date and time? And if I'm not mistaken, then you can always get to ask for a judge or the jury for a court order, to get their schedule of what they did on the phone that day. Because remember, they have to put everything in record. Everything's recorded everything's supposed to be electronically recorded in conversations dealing with when they deal with the public. Yeah, it's like I'm getting ready to start a deal on that myself. You know, what I just went through, you know, last month. But it's like when you file your complaint, you want to make sure that you're filing your complaint with factual evidence. And that has to be done in an affidavit, and you want to make sure that affidavit is certified. You want to make sure that affidavit is notarized. And if you could get I just had it on my mind, apostille on it, you want to get that, because then that way it's already set in gold. That's what they claim. So you want to make sure that you're covering all your bases. And then all your bases are covered. Then they can't sit there and try to go after you on something else, try to come up with something else. And this way you have your facts. But make sure that you do your research, and make sure when you do this, make sure the structure on the affidavit and the instrument you're writing, make sure you do the research of their administrative rules. Make sure you read their structures pretty damn good, so that way you know what, why, and how. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, what, why, and how. Because if you don't put those facts in of what they can do, why they can't do it, and, you know, and don't forget federal law, because they'll try to tell you that state law does not affect federal law. Federal law does not affect the state and federal laws, and they do, because the feds are over the states, and I don't care what they're doing. Now, California is trying to break away right now, so that way they can sit there and open up the borders in California, and that's the whole goal right there. They don't care about this country. Not one of them do. They took a buyout, I would assume, from Mexico and Soros and whoever else has been involved in those shady deals. And we are living this stuff right now today. And so when you put your affidavit in of your facts, you're making a deal, because an affidavit has to contain facts, evidence, truth, honor. You know, and that's what you're putting into that. And I don't have it pulled up right now, but I will go pull it up and tell you what an affidavit is as soon as my computer catches up to itself. But this is the one thing, when you're putting it in, and it depends on what like I said, it really comes down to circumstances of the case, really, of what the complaint is and what the evidence of what they've done. And that's the one thing, you can do it on an attorney. I don't care what people tell you, they are not exempt. Judges are not exempt. I even have the state and federal laws. I believe we have them posted up on new.org and trackers. So when they're trying to say, when people go, well, we're exempt, and people just throw their hands up and go, oh, we can't do nothing. And I talk to people all the time, and it's like, how come you're just doing what they told you to do? I mean, that's the same thing as religion. You do what a religious book tells you to do. Oh, turn the other cheek. So if they hurt you, they break your bones, they do assault you, they assault your family or your children, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, and only morons do that. Because morons are the ones that turn the other cheek. Because if you turn the other cheek, and if you don't turn the other cheek, if you turn the other cheek, what are you getting at for your family? How are you defending your family? How are you stabilizing yourself, defending yourself? So that's the one thing that people don't realize. And I mean, it depends on the circumstances of the forgiveness. It really does. I mean, it depends on how stupid the employee was. And sometimes there is kindness in the heart, but you have to remember, if you're doing kindness in the heart, what is that going to affect? And so, they could always ask them, and you could always make sure that you get a public apology letter. And then that way, that's one way to stop it and make it a fuse, because then that way, if you get a public apology letter, they've already admit their wrongdoing. And a public apology letter that's on their bulletin board or on their structure in their industry, that puts a shockwave into that, because others look at them about how they failed, and they got to look at themselves of how they're going to not fail. The other employees, because it is a big deal. And people don't realize how much of a big deal that really is, or this really is when it comes to a public apology. Because when a public apology is done, it saves a lot of people's faces. It saves, and, it could even save the servant's job. Sometimes I'm not always in favor of that. Depends on the circumstances. So, I mean, the main thing on that when you write these things is do your research. And we do have a lot of information on new.org and trackers. And that is the one thing to make sure. Do your research. Because you don't want to be made a fool, because when you're going after these men and women, you're going after them, and they're going after you. And don't forget, when you're filing these stuff, and if it's letters that you receive from them, let's say with vaccinations or from a traffic ticket, or whatever the information is, or whatever the circumstances is, when they do that to you, remember, that is slander. I don't care what anybody else tells you. That's slander. That's degrading your name. That's destroying you in public if that's publicized in a newspaper or if it's out in the public eye. So that's defamation of character, defamation of character. So it is slander. And remember, you have the rights to go after these men and women for slander. And that's the one thing that most people say, no, you don't. Yes, you do. When you get a ticket from a cop, and if you're going to sue them, don't forget to put slander in it. And that's the one thing that we were talking about the other day with a couple people. We got to sit down and put an affidavit together so we can put it on the website for vehicles that have been grand theft auto. Because if you get your vehicle taken, remember, that is grand theft auto, and you have to file it under that way of your state. And they have federal grand theft auto too, and you can file it federally. And I don't remember if I put it up, because I got to find it again if I haven't. But they actually have a law that if a cop takes your vehicle illegally, it is grand theft, and you go after the cop and the state on that. And so I have to relook on that one, and because I was talking to couple people in a group the other day on that one, and it's like, this is the one solution that we have. Because I mean, you got to remember, these guys they're all care about is how much money they're putting in their pocket, and that's what they look for, is how much money they're getting in their pocket. So that is the one thing that you have to be paying attention to, those circumstances. And it's very simple, because once you pay attention to those circumstances, things start changing. And then when you file on these people and you start getting successful, even if you're not successful, you got a couple complaints on them that have been gone through. And most complaints, if they give you a negative response to a complaint, Your response has to be immediately back to them within time frame, realistically, going against their statements, and then bring up why they're stating their their point of view for personal financial gain. It appears that they're doing this for personal financial gain to cover their tracks or to cover the circumstances of the criminal charges that they're trying to avoid. Because any fraction of violation, those are not criminal charges. They'll tell you it's a criminal charge or a crime, but it's not a crime. A crime is a personal and property damage. That's a crime. But a fraction is not a crime. I was talking to another guy, and he filed his paperwork because he got caught doing 40 miles over the speed limit. And he told him, basically, prove the jurisdiction you have on this. And the judge threw it out of the court case, because he was asking to prove the jurisdiction and then asking personal information on the officer. And they're going, well, we can't give you that. Yes, they can. He wanted his VIN number, Social Security number. Oh, that's right. He even filed for his registration of the FAIR Act. And so that's the one thing I do see. People are starting really to pay attention to this stuff. They are listening to what we're bringing out to them to protect their families. And this is the one thing that you've got to pay attention on when you're filing these complaints, because not only are you protecting your family, you're protecting yourself or your bloodline. It depends on the circumstances of the issue. So always be cautious, always be paying attention, always be aware. Because once you're aware, you're going to really pay attention, and you're going to find out a lot of things change. A lot of things happen for the good when you do things correctly. And there are people who do it, and, your name gets put on the block, and the cops don't want to talk to you. They won't pull you over. They're not going to harass you. A lot of people have already been put on the radar across, Eastern Oregon, and these cops know who's traveling down the road. They know the vehicle descriptions, and they have them. And so when they try to tell you that they don't have this information or they're not doing that, that's a bunch of baloney, because they are doing it. And they get away with it because people will be kind. And it's like, these guys are not kind to us. They break our windows, they damage our vehicles, they assault us, they kidnap our kids for personal and financial gain. So this is the one thing that people need to pay attention. These people are out to destroy us primarily because they're taught that we are the enemy. Because under the Trading with the Enemy Act, you are the enemy. That's a fact. We all are the enemy when it comes down to the way they look at it. And that's the way they're taught. That's the way they're trained through the programs that they're educated in. And it is a fact that they are trained that way. And if anybody gets the chance, I suggest that you can go set up at the police training station for a couple of days and walk around and listen, and you get a pass up there and learn, because we have that right. And, and I've thought about it myself to do that. I think that would be a wonderful thing. But I haven't had a chance to do it. Of course, I know they're probably terrified with me because they know me, and they know what I'll probably be up there for, to see what they're doing, the truth of it. But I think that would be a great thing to do, to tell you the truth. But this is the one thing, when you're filing your affidavits, get an affidavit of steel behind it. Make sure that you've got the information. Make sure you cannot lose. That is the one thing that you have to be able to look at the future. It's your job to basically, you're writing to predict the future. And people have been very successful doing that. And so that's the one thing that when you do this stuff, pay attention. Do this stuff. Think about this stuff. And when you got your kids, walk them through them. Ask them questions. Ask them what they think. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What was your opinion? How would you handle the situation or the solution to this? And that's the one thing, too. It is good to get the kids involved in that and ask them You know, hey, what is your solution on this? What are you going to do about it? So, I mean, it's very solution. I mean, it's very a positive thing when you do this, especially with your kids. Kids do pick up on things really rapidly. They are pretty damn good on picking up things. And so I suggest that, you know, my recommendation would be really work with your kids and educate them on those type of things. Let them walk through, bring them up. And most kids are plugged into a damn cell phone or a computer deal. So message the kids. Say, here's your homework. I expect you to get back to me. And if you don't get, you know, send it to me back in an email. You know, I mean, you know, seeing that they're going through this phase of the craziness of life where the people are not living pretty much in real reality today like we were about 30, 40 years ago. Because, I mean, you know, today, I mean, what is it, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't expect to have the cell phones like we do. I mean, I remember my first car phone I had in my car, back in the 80s, and that was costing me $3.50 a minute every time I used that phone. And, you know, it was great to have it. It was like a regular phone in the car. But that was, you know, that was 30, 35 years ago. And so technology has advanced so much, and we know that what it's been doing to our children. And so why don't we program the children to utilize the technology the way that we believe that they should be using it? And that means that they have to think. They can't get away with stuff. They have to think and do these things. So when they're thinking on these things and bringing these things out and you're sending homework on emails and that type of stuff, you know, that's the one thing that is really actually pretty cute when you think about it, because what are they going to do? They have one way to respond back, and that's the only way they can respond back on it. So, you know, that's the one thing that to utilize the information to better educate the children, that is one way of doing it. For that way, you're basically homeschooling your kids, and that's what I believe most people really should be doing, because the system, you know, when you go to schools today, I always think it's a waste of time when they bring the police cars in and the fire cars in and do all this stuff and wasting public taxpayer time and funding and money, because the kids should be learning. I mean, and it's really disturbing when I watch some of this stuff that people are going that it's okay to have these kids watching these gay and lesbian programs and all this stuff, or, you know, the big cities, most of them I don't know about here. I haven't seen that or heard that yet, but I got to check on that, see if they've done any of that gay stuff here in the libraries where they had those transsexuals or whatever you want to call them. You know, there's too many names that I like to say. But these men and women out there who are dressing in drag and doing all this stuff, who think it's cute and funny, you know, it was cute and funny when we saw it in movies years ago, but it's not cute and funny today. It's not cute and funny whatsoever today. And so in those things, you could file an affidavit of steel of child abuse on that. You know, besides child abuse, mind-altering structures, you could file, you could come up with a lot of things on that. You know, mind tricks, mind frame, mind control. There's a lot of things that could be played up on that one that you can look at doing that. And that's the one thing we need to start doing, these things. So when you're filing a complaint, I mean, it's like your library, you know, file an affidavit on the library. You know, and anyhow, whoever, my computer froze a minute, so you got to hang on until it catches up here so I can see what you sent. But that's the one thing that don't tell me my computer just dropped everything. Okay. Oh, yeah, don't forget mental abuse. Yeah. Psychological mental abuse. That's a big deal. People don't realize what it does to a kid. I grew up in California. I grew up in a structure where there was a lot of gay and lesbians in the San Francisco area. But the gay and lesbians didn't bother people like they do today. That's the one thing. They're not out there in the street corner screaming. Oh, yeah, don't forget bullying. But, see, bullying, I was always taught when somebody bullied you, just punched them in the face. You know, you didn't play that game. You know, when the bullies come after you, you went after the bullies. And I actually started doing that in junior high school and high school, literally going after bullies for entertainment purposes. Because I got bullied, and after I got bullied, I said, no way. When I punched the first guy in the face, nobody wanted to deal with me after that. And then a couple other issues happened that when I grew up, but, you know, that's part of life. But see, the one thing is that we get into this bully law or these bullying situations, and these people say, well, my kid committed suicide or they're traumatized by bullying. How come people are not educating their kids to take this stuff? How come they're not educating their kids to be strong enough to stand up against these things? How come they're not being educated in those circumstances? And that is the one thing that is so sad today that goes on, that people do not pay attention to with people want to call bullying. You know, I mean, I was talking to a lady a couple of weeks ago. No, actually, that was about 7 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago, it was a couple days before I ended up in the hospital, and she was complaining about her kids being bullied. And I'm like, well, how are they being bullied? And she goes, well, they're just picking on the kids because, you know, they don't have proper shoes or they don't have this type of money and stuff. Well, the other point is, how come you never brought it up to the parents? This is the way the parents are raising their kids. So this is something that you're raising your kids this way to be that proud. And so that's the things that we could bring up to these people, you know, to their children, and say that's the one thing is that you always go after the parents and saying, see how they're raising their children in our our areas. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do, a lot of other ways we could go about things. And so when you, like I said, and you got to realize when you're filing your affidavit of facts on these issues, it has to be 100% facts. It cannot be theories, thoughts, emotions, you know.
Excuse me, Ed.
Now when it comes to, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, my personal opinion on this. Wouldn't you think that starting to tell parents how they should be raising their children is getting dangerously close to becoming the CPS?
Yes, that's true. That's true. And that's the one thing that we have to sit there and pay attention to those things too. Yeah. But we could always work with the parents, bring suggestions up when they're bringing stuff like that up too. That's another point to bring in to that, because you know the one thing is we don't want to be telling any parents or anybody how to live, do anything, because that's not our responsibility. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be their responsibility what's going on with their children. So, and that's the one thing most parents, a lot of parents, do not pay attention to their children. That is the one thing that is a fact today. I mean, you know, they ignore the kids. They're too busy on their cell phones. They're too busy with their friends and groups and stuff like that. And, I mean, I watch that even on my own street corner here in my own county, where I watch parents do different things that I question, you know, because it just makes you wonder about the facts of what they're doing. And so that's the one thing that it's great, because I mean, I don't have to deal with them. And that is the other point too. We don't have to deal with these people unless we are in that position, you know, of them being around our neighborhood. And that's the one thing too, that when you get into that, like I said, I'm not too sure what a good point of view is. Let's say a public servant sat there and pulled you over and harassed you, all right? You can file a harassment complaint on the officer with an affidavit of seal to sit there and go, he assaulted me. He made me feel fear. He was a man armed, threatening my life. So that's the one thing that people don't put that in their affidavits, you know, especially with a cop. He comes up with a gun. You don't know what he's going to do. We have no idea what these men are doing or women are doing. So many of them have been shooting people in the street. Especially, we've even had them be shot disabled and elderly being shot. They just, what was that, Minnesota just did another case where they just killed another mentally retarded kid because he was sitting in the street and he didn't respond to the officer. He was mentally retarded. So what did? They shot him where he was sitting because he wasn't responding. And that's the thing that gets to me. These cops get this training on this stuff, and then they lie. They really do get this training. So it is frustrating when these men and women get this stuff and training on these things, and they don't sit there and follow through on them. And that's the one thing that you guys, we all have to do this. This is our responsibility. When we see something like this, we need to speak up. See, we cannot sit there and just be ignoring these things. And that's the one thing. If we continually ignore a lot of these things, we already see what's going on in our communities. I mean, our communities are basically going to heck in a handbasket. You know, especially when they're doing all this gay and lesbian teaching, which, you know, I mean, you know, if they want to publicize their stuff, hey, great, but we don't want to be part of it. You know, that's one thing. And they're saying, well, they have a right to do it because they need to get their word out, their points of view out, their facts out. Well, we don't know if they're facts. They're going by another way of thinking. They're going by another way of whatever their emotions that they're doing at this time. Because remember, they have their own emotion structure. When you start going off on another side of a path, especially something like that, your mind really changes on a lot of thinking, a lot of stuff that people would normally not do. And so that is the one thing that is sad, because people don't pay attention to that part there. And most people don't think about that. Because when people are doing that type of structure, their thinking completely changes. Their way of looking at things change. The way that their feelings and emotions change. The way they react change. So that is the one thing. I got to crash my computer. I don't know what the heck it's doing again. I hate that. But anyhow, it's just one of those things that you don't know what they're thinking. You know, because that does change your thought patterns. It changes your thinking. It changes your way that your emotions are working. And you can watch it in their body language. I mean, that's the one thing that me and my former wife, we used to sit there and, you know, people watch. That's one thing I used to miss being going down to big city sometimes. People watching. You can sit there and tell, watching them walk down the street, and you can tell most of them what kind of job they have, their attitude, their language, you know. And it is fun. If you ever sat there, I don't know if any of you got there, sat down in a big city or even in a small town, and really sat there and watched the people for a day, just people watch. And that is fun, actually. It is interesting because you can watch people's attitudes, you watch what they're doing, and so this is how you get to learn your environment around you, too, is people watching. Because you get to know how the people think. You get to know what the people are doing. And that's the same thing with public servants. And that's why, you know, I'm saying that, you know, it'll be worth some time if you think about it. Just go spend a day at the academy. Listen to what they do. You know, they got brochures at the academy, too, that they give out when people visit. And so those are things that, you know, we can learn, and opportunity to bring other points of view out. And don't bring it to them in academy or stuff like that. Take the information, leave with the information. You know, you don't get into personal conversations with them. And I mean personal conversation about your children, about your job, about your life. You're just going to learn about them. You don't want to have them part of your life. You don't want them to, you know what you're doing and your structure of how you're surviving. And that's what we're all doing, basically, is surviving today. So, you know, once upon a time we used to live, and of course that's been 20 years ago. And that is the one thing that we're all having frustrations with today, because we know what they've done. We know what the Democratic Party have changed, like Pelosi and Maxine Waters and Charles, and we've got it going on with a whole bunch of these guys, especially in California. Montana and Idaho. These guys, and don't forget Illinois. Illinois is a state that is basically, they put Muslim law in Illinois. And some of these cities are trying to sneak it in through the city council and different administrative rules, and people are not paying attention. That's why, when I sent out that thing to file on the public employees, asking them their jobs, asking them their, if they're filed and registered, I got the structure if you would like it. Send me the email. I'll send it to you because, like I said, I've got to get this other one rewritten, which I will have rewritten by tomorrow night or Tuesday, because I got to start getting that one out. Because, like I said, I got a commitment that I've already promised some people that I was getting them mailed out, emailed out to all the cities, counties in the state of Oregon. And so we'll be putting that up on the new.Oregon tracker as soon as I get mailed out. So all that will be mailed out with all the counties and cities and stuff. It'll take me probably a week to get it all mailed out. And so once I get it mailed out, we'll get it posted up there, and it's going to be a long structure, definitely a long structure for that, because, what is it, 36 counties with the cities and administration. And that's the other thing, too. I want to bring up, everybody keeps going about food share. And we have more immigrants living off of food share. Our country supplies more food than anybody else in the world. When it comes down to it, survival food or whatever else you want to talk about, however else you want to say it. And this is the one thing that people do not get, because how come we're not growing food? State of Washington 5 years ago, I believe it was, because I've been pushing in Oregon for 20 years for them to plant food in the parks, planting food on the highway, and then people go, well, the highway traffic, well, you got to think about something, if you're hitchhiking or if you get stranded, if there's an apple tree or carrots laying around, something like that, we're thinking about saving ourselves. We have to plant food. We can't just let the commercial industry completely run us like it is doing right now today. And people don't realize that the commercial industry basically comes down to the Vatican. The Vatican is running your life. The Vatican is controlling you. All your religion organizations are running us. And the saddest part about it is people keep going back to this stuff, and then they want to give their homes to these people. They give them their assets. Everybody goes, well, you need to give some money to the church. What has the church ever done for anybody? Oh, let's pray. Well, you can't pray to get an affidavit in. You can't pray to have something accomplished. You have to physically get out there and do it. And that is the one thing that people don't forget, or do forget, that they have to figure out how to get out there and physically do stuff again. And we're having that difficulties, and we see it in the news media. We see it especially on YouTube and Facebook all the time. We see it all the time on Yahoo News. I mean, it's interesting with the Yahoo News because, like I said, I don't have major TV stations, so all my stuff is on Yahoo or YouTube and that type of stuff. But you'll be amazed what you can get off of YouTube. People can get amazed what it is. But I want to bring up one point, too. I guess Alex Jones is being attacked on YouTube again. Well, Alex Jones once wasn't so bad as he is today. Now he's pushing all of his products and stuff. So that's part of the reason why they banned him on YouTube, because he's sitting there putting his commercial stuff on a free structure and pumping it out to people without paying the advertising to YouTube. There's solutions to the problem. If he was smart, he would pay the advertising fees to YouTube and let them advertise for him. Then they can't screw with him. But see, people don't think about common sense, common things of how to do a business. That's just a common sense thing of doing business because, it's one of those things that benefits, I don't know if his products are really good. If you ever watch him try to drink some of his products or take some of his products, his facial expression says it all. and I wouldn't be part of any of that, to tell you the truth, because it is horrifying what goes on in these things that happen today. When you watch Alex with some of his stuff, he's got some good stuff. I've followed him off and on for years. Been a little disappointed with him because a couple of times I was supposed to be a guest on his show to explain some of the real facts, but apparently he can't have the real facts because of his relatives being in the law enforcement industry. So that would put a conflict of interest. People would say, well, how does Alex know this before somebody else does? Do your research. Pay attention. He tells you who his family is at times on his show. So it's not picking on Alex. It's just when Alex sitting there whining to the world that, all of a sudden they're cutting me off of YouTube. Hey, you're advertising on YouTube free. I mean, we're not advertising. A lot of people ain't out there advertising their products on YouTube. But see, most people who are advertising their old products on YouTube are only doing, making a couple grand compared to making millions like Alex Jones is doing. I guess his industry is making, what was it, like 40, 50 million a year now? So that's the one thing that, he writes it all off anyways. He's in the system. He bitches about the system, but he's in the system. So that's the one thing that I have questions about dealing with that. And so it's, it's really interesting. And you can always ask, his ex-wife is on Facebook. She's out there publicizing stuff. She doesn't have a problem speaking out. And so that's the one thing, is always look at the other opponents out there. Look what's transpired. And then when it comes down to that, Alex has got to quit bitching on some things, the way I look at it. But he does it for commercial zone, commercial progress, or what he thinks is progress, or commercial structure. It's hard to say with him on things like that. But, I wish him the best and everything else, But I would like to see him be a little bit more honest out there. And also, too, without yelling and screaming like he does, there's ways of things you don't have to sit out there and be that boisterous. And so it is interesting. It is interesting. So, but anyhow, I don't want to get too much into Alex. I did enough on that one. I didn't even expect to go into that direction tonight. But it's just one of those things that happen, and so it's just, he's got a lot to learn on some of the structures. So I wish him the best of luck. But when you're watching his stuff, you're looking at his products and stuff, be cautious, be realistic, and do your research. Because we have to do our research, and we're supposed to be educating our kids and teaching our kids to do the research and do things correctly. And that's what we need to do, is teach them correctly. So when we start teaching them correctly, then there's no issues. And so the other point I wanted to bring up, too, that I've been posting out there is I got the Maritime and Admiralty Law language video that we're going to be posting up on the front page. I think this description needs to be out there. It's a good explanation how the court system works, and I've been dealing with a lot of people for the last few months dealing with the tax situation. And I'm going to read something to you. This is one thing I want you guys to comprehend, because remember, the IRS is property taxes too. The IRS is not a government agency. It is an agency of the IMF, Internal Monetary Fund. And that's the one thing you need to realize that. And this goes by diverse field metal products versus the IRS. And this is also, too, if you look at Public Law 84564, and this is also, too, Senate Report 94-1148, page 5967. And it recognizes the plan of 26 public laws. And dealing with that, that's 102-391. And so this is the one thing. The other thing is the International Monetary Fund is an agency of the United Nations. Black Law Dictionary, 6th edition, page 816. The United States has not had a treasury since 1921, and that is 41 Stat Channel or page 214. Or no, wait a minute, CH 214, page 654. Excuse me. And the United States Treasury, like I said, is a monetary fund, and we know that as under Presidential Documents, Volume 2-4, number 4, page 113. Also, to clarify it, 22USC 285-2887. So this way you guys are getting this. The United States does not have any employees because there is no longer a United States. No more recognized over 200 years of bankruptcy. That's filed under executive order. What the heck? Oh, what are you doing, computer? That's under executive order. Let me get back to where I was at. My computer flashed. Anyhow, the FCC, CIA, FBI, NASA, all other alphabeticals, the government agencies, held stock in the agency. So they all own their own stocks, and that's United States versus Strong 254 US 491, and also Lewis versus US 680 F2 and second 1239. Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations through the MRF. So that's where Trump is going. Let's get rid of the United Nations. And all these people are screaming and yelling and panicking because they don't have any comprehension of the reality, because Social Security was never set up for any foreigners. It was set up only for United States bloodline Americans only. If you read the original contracts, the original paperwork, compared to when they changed it, and we do publicize the court case of that, what was that, 1927 or 1937. It's in the letter I sent out to everybody. And, they already said that Social Security, is for us. And also, too, Social Security has $68 billion in reserves. They sit there and lie to people all the time. We're bankrupt. They're doing that so they could steal the money. If they could convince you to get rid of the money, all right? So if they want to get rid of the money, they have to give that back to us. We paid into it. It's our money. We paid into it. Nobody else did. So that's the one thing that, people have got to realize. And then people will bitch that, well, foreigners, they don't get their Social Security and they don't get their money back and they have to pay. Technically, they don't have to pay anything. And the other point is that's not an accurate statement. They're not part of America. They're not part of the United States. They don't have any rights. They're immigrants. Immigrants and immigration has no rights, period, in the United States. I don't care what the ACLU says, why they rip off people and lie, cheat, and steal. Because remember, the ACLU is founded off of the 1871 August. What is that? Okay. Yes, I'll get to that in a second. And then the one thing too is that 1871, the Bar Association was formed in the United States. And also too, yes, Clinton signed Social Security, not of our pay structure. He signed Social Security funds over the Queen of England from the employers that are paying it. So, and it's really, people got to really read that, because that's the one thing that when he signed that over, he committed treason to this country. And that's where I'm trying to get people to comprehend that everybody bitches, how come these people ain't going to jail? Well, how come we ain't doing this? Oh, yeah. And, that was Heberly versus Davis, 301 U.S. 619. And these are the court cases. And so, they're claiming it's not an insurance or contract, but the one paperwork I have going back to 1937 says it is. So, and then the other thing, it says you own no property. This is the one thing, Senate document 4373, 73rd Congress, first session. Yes, you do own stuff, but you have to file it. You have to separate it from them. So if you believe half these things that you don't own anything and you have no rights, this is the one thing that, this is why this country is going nuts. And then you got people out there saying that, we're still part of a British colony. No, we're not. We put up the laws on that. I've written the affidavits, even filed it in the federal courts on it. Yeah, and this is the one thing I always hate it when people say this. We're a British colony. The United States is a corporation. Yes, the United States is a corporation. That's the British colony. We, the people of 48 states, are not the British colony. And that was even signed back in 1789 when the 13 colonies separated, or joined together, and separated from England. And so that's the one thing. When I put some of this stuff out, I want you guys to read this stuff. And when they put some of this stuff in, people got to pay attention. It's like they keep saying that we're a British colony since 1796. No, we're not, since the Revolutionary. The British colony did exist primarily before the Revolutionary War. That's why we went to war. So when they keep saying that we're a British colony, they're talking about the United States Incorporation. And to clarify, it is a corporation they're talking about. They're not talking that we are part of it. And we already know under the Treaty of 1213, British is owned by the Vatican, so are your court systems, Article 1 court systems. And that's the one thing that is essential to pay attention. And, the Civil War was not a Revolutionary War. I know that. But in a sense, it was the second Revolutionary War because we bought the South that was funded by the British government.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get to, was that what everybody calls the Revolutionary War was actually a civil war because they were still British subjects at that time.
Mm-hmm. And that goes by the 13th and 14th Amendment, where people go and they say, well, we're still owned and all this stuff. Well, you have to really read this stuff because it says even in the congressional papers, there's a large C and small c citizen. That was even in the Dred Scott case. But see, people want to interpret things. They don't want to read this. We already know the Pope claims that he owns the world, and it's like he can go to hell. He is hell. Any religion is hell. The Bible's hell. Because I haven't seen anything that's been produced out of that that's done a lot of good. Well, at least for me. I can speak for myself. And that's the one thing that the Pope can abolish any law in the United States incorporation. And that's the one thing that people need to get cleared on that. It's a corporation. And so when it comes to the corporation, that's with your name. So that's why I filed to own my name. That's why I filed identity theft. That's why I'm writing my claims on identity theft, because they gave me the name. Technically, my parents gave me the name, but they certified it, documented it, and stole it, so they wanted to claim my name and my assets. Well, I didn't give them that authorization. So that's called identity theft, and that's the one thing that you need to make clear when you're doing identity theft claims of damages, and always put in, what is that, 3177, injured party, as well as, I'm trying to remember what it is, brain fart, I'll come back to that here in a minute. I think you know where I'm going with that one, but I'm having a brain fart right now on that one. And we are slaves who own absolutely nothing, not even thinking of our children. And this is the one thing that comes from Tillman versus Roberts, 108 SO62, and then Van Coten versus Van Coten. And this is in the Senate record, Senate document 4387 through 73rd Congress. First session. And this is the one thing, see, if you're not filing to own yourself and own your bloodline, and that's the one thing, you don't want to get into estates. Estates could be divided into districts or anything like that. They can divide any estate in any way the judge wants. And you have to realize that does happen. That is a fact. And so, and the people does not include you or me, you know, and that's the one thing, you know, I still have a problem with that one, even though it says Barron versus Mayor of City Council of Baltimore. This is 32 USC 43rd. And this is the one thing that the people does not include you or me. Well, who are the people? Is that the people of the government? Is that the people of religion? You know, it says we the people, so we've all been taught to think about we the people. And so, you know, we got these court cases up here, Barron versus Mayor of City Council of Baltimore. All right, so if we the people does not include you and me, how come is not clarified to us through our education schools? You know, in a corporation arrest code breakers. We know that. So when you get a traffic ticket or you get pulled over, something like that, they're going after you to increase the debt. So that's the one thing you could always tell a public servant when you go in for paying a traffic fine. If you do pay it, always file a 1099, file it with the IRS, so that way the IRS knows that they had income. And that is the one thing that people need to realize, that, you know, income is for them, not us. And Executive Order 12803 says everything in the United States is up for sale. Hospitals, prisons, airports, roads, even the water. That's why I tell people, and I tell people on this one thing I do tell people on, collect rainwater. You know, it's your responsibility. And when they sit there and say, well, you can't collect the rainwater, well, another option is you got rain buckets underneath your roof. They can't tell you on what's coming off your roof what you can't collect. There's a will, where there's a will, there's a way. You can always get around these administrative rules. And that's what they are, administrative rules. They're nothing more than that. And we know our public servants and our government basically is an illusion, fiction. And this is the one thing that with, I'm trying to remember his name right now, Rod Class. You know, he's done a lot of good stuff, but how come Rod Class hasn't filed on these people? How come Rod Class hasn't personally gone after them? That's the one thing that gets to me. How come he hasn't done the affidavits with so many people to go after these people for what they have done? And he knows what he's doing. You know, I watch a lot of his videos. I've talked to him many times over the years. And that's what disturbs me, and I brought it up to him. How come people are not filing these criminal charges on these people? Because these people are out there destroying us. And so I want to make this one thing clear. Challenges to a judge, universal on all cases. A judge who refuses our law is loyal to some other authority. Ask the judge if he or she is a member of the State Board Association. If so, challenge the judge under 22 USC 611 as a foreign agent under the 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act, All judges, lawyers are required under 28 USC 732 to file and have an oath of office. Ask them for it. In my county, we've done that. They don't have oaths of office. The county is self-insured. So it's been one of those things in my county, and it's probably in your county. And to see self-insurance on that, they can't do anything about that. And if they are self-insured, you have to go after their assets, not the corporation. You have to go after them personally. And the other point is that I got to say this, in admiralty jurisdiction, now the judge is subject to criminal prosecution and civil litigation for any injury he or she may have caused you. If no, the attorney is not a judge. He has no lawful authority to proceed. Your state representative. Say, this is the one thing that people don't get, your state representative, and that's where I got to get back all of these people here this week too. Because your state representative is your representative. That's why I recommend if you get a traffic ticket or something like that, send a certified letter to the judge and to your state representative, and you're demanding him to represent you, because that's his job. He has to represent your straw man account, not the man, not the woman. And that's the one thing that people have got to start putting this stuff together. An impeachment of a judge, present the facts in the case. You can do a petition with an affidavit of facts to impeach a judge. And it has done, and it has been done. I know it has been done. And so that's the one thing. And it has to, everything has to be notarized and sent by certified mail. And I always recommend that when you send certified mail out, always send yourself a copy of certified mail. All right, with everything in the same thing you sent the judge, everything you sent the state attorney general, everything you sent to everybody else in the agency, whatever you did on that. And you always make sure you send yourself a copy certified. And if you got an evidence bag, put it in the evidence bag. And if not, put it somewhere where it's real safe. Because now you have factual evidence when they don't respond. And that was the one thing that we were talking about the other night. You know, they were saying that they sent information to Washington, D.C., and they didn't respond. Well, you have to respond back to them. It's your responsibility to make sure they do the filing. And we do have it, and I do put it out there where the clerk has, by law, has to file. And so I always add that into my letters. So that way if they say, well, we didn't see this or we didn't do that, well, isn't it the law that says that, isn't it the law that says you have to file my papers? Isn't this a fact that you have to do this? So this is the one thing that is sort of frustrating to me on that when people don't get that one. And so when people don't comprehend and comply to that or think about those things, it is one of those frustrating positions that we all pay for. Say, you and I pay for this stuff one way or the other. You know, it might not be monetary value. It might not be their fictitious paper money, but we pay one way or another. We pay with, being harassed, threatened, what's happened to our children, what's happened to people around us. So these are things that we need to pay attention to what the circumstances are around us. And so once we're able to start doing more and more putting these things together, and I'm working on more and more affidavits. I got other people's information that's sent it up to me, and we're slowly working to get them up on their own page, and that way that's their responsibility of what they're putting up there. So that way it is not our circumstances, because I don't have a problem that for people to work together, and some of us really do have difference of opinions. And that's the one thing that if people got to realize when we have difference of opinions, if we're going in the same direction, that is the main thing. We're at the same direction, so we're still working with each other, for each other. So we might have a difference of opinion, but, one law says one thing, one administrative rule says another. So it's just looking at that. So, and let's discuss the things that's called remedy. Black Law Dictionary, 4th edition, defines remedy as the means by which a right is enforced or a violation of a right is preserved, readdressed, and compensated. Remedies are of 4 kinds. 1, by an act of party injury, the principle of which are defense, reception, distress, entry, abandonment, and seizure. And don't forget the rest. Also, 2, operating under a law is a case retained in matter by agreement between the parties, by a court satisfaction of arbitration. So, until you get remedy, it has to be agreed on both sides. And that's the one thing that people have got to realize, that there is remedy out there. And the other thing is, everybody will throw their hands up and says, oh, we don't got a good judge. We don't have that. We don't have this. Get another judge. File on a judge when he's not honoring his oath of office. You can make sure that he's out of office. See, that is the one thing that we have the solutions. We have the solutions to these problems. And so until we get the solutions back to the problems and start to addressing these circumstances, this is the one thing that it's our responsibility to address these problems. Everybody, and I know people say, I just hired an attorney. Okay. I've had many people call me up and, ask me, do you have an attorney? I'm pro se, and you see it all the time on Facebook and stuff. And it's like, and then, I got people that say, I'm an attorney and I'll do pro se. And I ask them, how many court cases have you won? How many court cases? We want to see court cases. We want to see facts. We don't want, what is that, my friend? I thought you were prepared for that. We don't want hearsay bullshit. That's the one thing. We don't want to get compensated or caught up in hearsay bullshit. Now, we've been watching a lot of people do different things recently, and some of the stuff they've been filing, and we want to see people get more and more involved, but we want to make sure that people are not being put in a position so that way they ended up losing their assets, losing their home. And that is the one thing that people need to pay attention to. We know the Bureau of Prisons makes a motions under 18 USC 4205 or 3582C1. We know prisons are privately operated. They've been privately operated for years now. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that these prisons are not our prisons. They are foreign prisons when they're putting us in jail for traveling. That's why I ask people, I'm waiting for people to respond, because I've been asking people for a couple of years now. Ask your county sheriff, does he honor the Constitution? Is he going to arrest people for traveling? That's the one thing that people got to realize. Ask these questions to these people. Because, we want to know if they're going to arrest people for traveling without a license, even though the law says you don't need one. And ask them, so in other words, you're a corporation member, you're not a real sheriff. Because the sheriff technically is not even supposed to be on the highways or on the streets. The sheriff is supposed to be in the courtroom, period. He's not supposed to extend outside the courtroom. And that's what amazes me, how most people don't get that. That's where I've been, I'm blessed in a lot of things that I've been doing with my structure, with a lot of public servants.
Hearsay bullshit. Hearsay bullshit.
Took you a while. So that's the one thing. And to realize the other point, too, the bond is a lieu of personal liability. So, and that is the one thing that your elected and public servants have is personal liability when they are dealing with you on the streets, in a courthouse, when they deal with you anywhere. You know, and that is the one thing that people got to realize. And also, too, if anybody doesn't know, but an upside-down United States flag is an official sign of duress and distress. It is not meant to be or not officially recognized as any other type of description when it is displayed at the right reasons. So, I mean, and that's one thing is that I had my flag flying upside down for a while out here. And my God, man, I had neighbors coming up and trying to chew me out for that. And, you know, what do you mean? You know, don't you understand it's under duress? And I said, yeah, don't you know what's going on with me? Haven't you read the paper? Haven't you read the structure, what I've been living through? I think it qualifies. You know, and that's the one thing, too. And when you are doing prosecution, okay, you have to read the federal rules of evidence and statute rules of procedure. Because when you file your personal complaints on these men and women with your evidence affidavits, you know, that's the one thing. A corporation or papers, they cannot testify. So that's the one thing, too, when you're going into court. How can a corporation or cop testify in court when he cannot? He's a corporation. He cannot. He's an immaterial in existence entity, and that's United States versus Labusco, 431 U.S. 78397 SCT 20452 LED second 752, and this was done not that long ago. Believe this. This was done June 9th, 1977. So it states right there that you can, a corporation or paper, they cannot testify. So that means all public servants cannot testify. See, that's why I was bringing up the other night that I'm thinking about, but I'm not into the voter structure, but I've been thinking about putting a ballot measure together that all elected and public officials, servants, contractors, and thereof cannot vote via participation in voting. Because, well, who do they vote for? Themselves. And we know that that's what they do, you know. And it's also, too, I want to make this clear to you, too, and I got to put this in my other letter that I'm putting together right now. It is undeniable fact that an artificial identity, a corporation, cannot take oaths. They cannot make affidavits. So that means a state attorney general, district attorney, a cop, anybody else cannot make an affidavit. That's why when you go to court and if you are facing, you know, criminal charges, what they're calling criminal charges, make sure you demand to see the affidavit of who wrote the affidavit. So you want to know who wrote that affidavit. And if a district attorney or a court or a judge or anybody like that, you know, that is the one thing that they can't write these things. They don't exist when it comes down to it. They can only proceed. They don't have authority to write an affidavit. You know, that's the one thing. You know, I've talked to many people who are going through stuff, and I ask them, did you actually read the affidavit on it? Did you see the affidavit on the structure? And they're going, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm going, how come you're not questioning their jurisdiction or authority? But most people just do what they're told, just like the Bible. They're all programmed by, oh, well, we've just got to do what we're told, or are we going to have penance, or we got to pray for forgiveness. And it is right crazy. Anyhow, This is the one thing I've been trying to get a hold of the people and the natives. Walters versus the United States, 207, United States. 564-1908 was a United States Supreme Court case clarifying water rights of all American Indian reservations. Is a doctrine which is meant clearly define water rights of American Indians in a case where the right was not clear. The case was first argued October 24th, 1907. Decision reached January 6, 2008. The case stands the United States government to acknowledge the viability of American Indian water rights and how rights to water relate to continued survival of self-sufficient of American Indians. And you try to explain this to these people, and they don't get it. That's the frustration. You know, they're out there screaming and yelling about water rights, and I'm telling them, how come you're not filing on these people? How come you're not doing this? How come you're not, you know, everybody wants to sit and whine and cry. They don't want to do any work. Oh, don't freeze up on me again, computer. They don't want to get out there and do work. They want to whine, complain, and bitch. And that's the one thing, instead of whining and complaining and bitch, we have solutions to these. They have the rules and regulations. They have the laws in this stuff. They know what the structure is. So we have to come back with them, you know. I mean, even trying to get this through Joanne Spotted Bear, I tried to get this stuff to Joanne Spotted Bear. That never happened. So I don't know what happened. I sent her stuff. So what did she do? She just defriends me, like, you know. Well, whatever's going on in her mind, that's her mind, okay? You know what I'm saying? So, come on, computer. Oh, I got to crash my computer again, damn it. But, I mean, that's one thing about Joanne Spotted Bear. She's out there on her little horsepower, you know, that she's trying to make her claim, which I have nothing against Joanne. I've talked to her many times. She's even spent time with Dave in Washington, D.C., even at Dave's house. And it's like, how come she's not willing to learn? I sent her a whole bunch of stuff. I sent her the laws on water rights. I sent her stuff on congressional records. You know, never a thank you. And she never really brings it up in her conversations on her YouTube videos. So when it comes to water rights, yes, we do have the right to water. Everybody has the right to water. I don't care what God says. I don't care what Jesus says. I don't care what the Bible says. And I don't care what the Pope says. You know, the Great Spirit gave us food, water, and that's what we're supposed to be living off of. Commercial industry has come over and taken over our lives and our families and stuff like this, and we're still allowing it to do it. You know, it amazes me how much people spend on iPhones and, you know, long distance service and all this stuff. You know, I mean, it still shocks people today, you know, when I talk to them. It's like, you don't have a cell phone? I say no. Even though that, you know, on disability, I can qualify for a cell phone. But see, I don't get no state assistance. Period. I live on my disability, so I mean, I struggle. Yes, I could go get the other state assistance and stuff, but then I'm liable. I'm not going to be liable to these people, and they know it. They know I know it. I've even got it filed in their own office. I mean, literally, I've got it filed in their offices. I've got it filed in disability. You know, and so it is amazing. I mean, disability is going after me, and I've gone after disability. I'm still trying to get my information back for disability after it was stolen out of my house because it was interesting because when they tried to put me in federal prison in 2006 after destroying my family and stuff, Department of Justice came out and said that the local government, mayor, city council, county commissioners, senators, and that included Kate Brown, had a personal vendetta out against me. So, I mean, and that stuff is real that happens with these people. They do this. They put you on a list. They know it. They'll come play these psychological games. You know, I mean, I've been in the past just pulled over and harassed when I opened up things on DHS. When I was spending a lot of time at the Capitol, and I opened up a lot of stuff on DHS. And that's the one thing that people don't want to pay attention to. And that's the one thing to bring up. The Ninth Circuit Court, January 28th or 27th, 2018, clearly stated, the Ninth Circuit Court said that they need to have a warrant to take a child. And so this is the one thing that you need to pay attention to, that you need to have that law hanging up on your wall in your kitchen. So they come up to your door, you hand it to them. Say, it's you're handing them, here it goes. I've been enjoying a lot of YouTube videos where I've been watching how people in the last recent couple of years have really paid attention to what's going on with DHS, that they don't have a warrant, they cannot come into your home, they cannot take your kid, and that is the one thing that is a blessing. Because people are listening, they are paying attention. And so that is the blessing. It's taken a while for people to open up their minds, open up their eyes, open up their hearts to what the truth is. But it is happening, folks. It really is happening. We see it. But like I said, the one thing is that we bring up, don't get trapped in the games with everybody else, We're still trying to get involved in House Resolution 192, getting that figured out. We've got the laws on that. I got more I'm putting up. And it is that we need to start collectively working on this so we get our bills paid for. Now my computer is going off in a different direction. Okay, what's going on here? Anyhow, it is interesting because we have these things right now today that are right now working for us. But it makes sure that you have to make sure it works. It's your responsibility to make sure these things work. All of our responsibility. And I'm not going to say it takes a village, because I'm not going to speak democracy devil words. Because a village to raise kids, come on. It took the neighbors to take care of and look over kids. There was no village. Neighbors work together. This is America. This ain't no British colony. And it really disturbs me when I get all these people saying, we're a British colony. Don't you know that, Ed? You don't have rights. And I said, I didn't ask for that. They brought it to me, so I'm speaking out. It's that simple. And we do have rights. We do have structure of rights, definitely. And so when people sit there and say we don't have rights, that is crazy baloney bullshit. Don't get caught up in people's bullshit. We got enough of that going on. The kids have got enough of that going on. The kids don't even get honest truth anymore today. Most kids don't get honest truth. They don't even know what the truth really is. The schools are nothing but a failure to us since they put the federal school administration in 1968. When they did that, that really screwed us up. Because all your public funds went to this new corporation instead of going to, what is that, the kids. It would be nice if it went right back to the kids the way it's supposed to be. I remember the days when you didn't have to buy pencils and papers and backpacks and all that stuff. I remember when they actually had school supplies in the schools. And that's the other thing, they had school supplies. That was in the budget. Then they took the money out of the budget for school supplies and they put it in their own pocketbooks for their own financial gain. And that is the truth facts. They sit there and they do it even today. It's like the uninsured motorist fund that I got Senator Arnie Roeblen on a YouTube video admitting how the Democratic Party took the uninsured motorist fund. And this is the one thing that sort of disturbs me, trying to get people to understand that. Then I have people that says, well, we all should pay insurance. It's all of our responsibility. And I keep asking people, prove it. This is one thing, prove what you're saying. A lot of people can't prove what they're saying. So that's the one thing, you always want to have facts. You don't want to hear say bullshit. And that's the one thing that we want to make sure that that does not continue. We're trying to get away from
Hearsay
all that.
bullshit. Hearsay bullshit.
You know, we want to get away from that. Anyhow, I've been going on for some time here. I had a couple of things I wanted to address, but what I'm going to do is we'll open up the floor, but I want to make sure people, you know, comprehend what the public, you know, and read your public law, 7310 USC 3-409. Read this stuff. Read what it says.
Yo, man, Ed.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book. I know what you were saying is really good. I don't want to say none of that I say is wrong. But you know, say America is an English colony. Reading a book called Emergence from Illusion, and we had two Congresses going simultaneously.
Yes.
One of it was in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically the Federalists, like, you know, Alexander Hamilton, leader of the Federal Society. That was all pro-British area, and they had the University Printing Press Company that basically was the mouthpiece of the British federal system. And the other Congress was in Philadelphia, and that was the organic one, and they had deputies. You said we said our 14 colonies went up there, and they were our deputies, and they had, you know, they could speak for us. Whereas like a representative, you say you're a representative of Congress, that is nothing more than a power of attorney, and it's nowhere near as powerful as a deputy. And they were different. And the Federalists, or the New York City federal government, they done enumerated powers. That was what they were. It was just a contract with them. And in the War of 1812, this was all planned. It was not just a half-chance thing. They went in, they burned all the archives of the Philadelphia Congress. Mm-hmm. And then they rewrote in their printing press company, the University Press. They started rewriting all these, new versions and giving themselves, more than just the enumerated power. They were giving themselves the unenumerated power, and they just took over. And they started threatening all of the deputies of the organic government, and that's why, we always see okay, we have the enumerated powers, and we hired the British government. So why do we have just one Congress up in D.C.? What happened? Well, there should be two of them. Well, we did have two, but they deliberately sabotaged the real one.
And that's a valid point. That's a real fact, too. And that's what we're still dealing with today. And that's the one thing that people do not know, that we do have two representative structures in the system out there.
That's right. And
go ahead.
Judge Anna, she tells a story that there's I think it's a colonel. He went back and he took the, they tried to bankrupt everybody. They bankrupted us several times.
Hearsay bullshit. Hearsay bullshit.
Is that hearsay bullshit?
Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
That's history. That's history, my friend. 1860, we had a bankruptcy under Lincoln, and 1907 was a bankruptcy. 1933 was a bankruptcy. But when you go into a bankruptcy, they can liquidate you, and they fully intended to liquidate all the government to take it over.
Yeah, but see, you have to be part of that bankruptcy for them to liquidate you. See, and that's the one thing. If you don't own yourself, and if you're not filing and separating yourself and making sure that apparently you're not known in their structure, so they can't bankrupt you.
Yeah, but they can bankrupt their own corporation. That's what they were doing.
Right, that's what they're doing, yes. And your business was a corporation. And prior to, 1937, when the birth certificates became basically finally in the structure where they went after that and started issuing birth certificates in 1940 in the hospitals. You are aware of that they didn't start really issuing birth certificates and all that until 1940.
Right. They did start just making that mandatory, and they did Social Security cards, all that. They just started making us do that. But when if you hire an attorney, that's another thing. Yes, you got to look for wins. You got what is your record? But when you hire an attorney, you automatically give that court jurisdiction, and you also prove that you're incompetent. And also, he can't really testify for you. All he can do is hearsay. So you're and then too, he's part of that. He's part of that little clique there of the bar association, and he's going to do whatever that judge wants him to do ultimately, unless you pay him real well, and he can bribe everybody off for you or something. So
and that's the key point, what you said, bribing everybody off.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Now, the caller, who was that judge you had stated?
Judge Anna, she was, telling us a lot of this stuff.
Are we talking Anna von Reitz or whatever her name is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Judge
that's why I said hearsay bullshit. She is not a judge.
No, she's not. She's a common law judge. If you know what that means.
Yes, I do, and no, she's not. And I've done the research on her. I have a letter from her admitting that she is not. And
you can elect. They can be elected as a common law judge by your own assembly. They elect you.
All right, let me get this for you so you can see on her own words. But I know what you're saying. That's what our system technically is supposed to be, but it hasn't been that way for some time. And see, that's the point that we want to get back to our system. And I know Ann has done a lot of good points out there, but don't forget Ann von Rice was the foundation of Bruce Bassett, all those Continental judges. She is the founder of all that. She's the one who set Bruce up with the education. She is the one who did all that, and then when the shit hit the fan, she's the one who wrote a letter to everybody and told everybody that she withdraws her name and any contact with any of them, and I have that letter too. So I'm very cautious when it comes to Ann on her stuff, and I do I do keep in contact with her. We do talk on a lot of stuff, but I'm just saying
she's not the only one yet. We have a court here in Texas, Robinson County, and in 2009, the old judge died, but he was running a common law court. So you can't say there ain't such a thing as a common law judge.
It's called an Article 3 court technically, and that's the one thing that it's an Article 3 court.
Okay.
See, and that's the one thing that we're supposed to be having running is an Article 3 court instead of what's being run right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm going to send this to you here right now.
You ever heard of the National Assembly?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Now, they are setting up the legitimate government all over again. And eventually, they're going to have their own clerks, county recorders, and then they're going to run for judges, and we're going to elect our own officials, just like we're setting up a legitimate government. And so that's how you do it. You get elected by your assembly to these posts. Your recorder or your even your law enforcement, and your judges. All of that, all your jurors, they're all elected by these assembly that you're building up. Yeah.
Yeah, but see, some of that assembly stuff basically runs from the England's Foundation, and the reason why I don't like that because if they start making city administrative rules and stuff, if you don't follow, it's worse than what we've got today. Come on, computer. Quit freezing up on me. See, that's the one thing that there's a lot of good structure. Oh, damn computer. There's a lot of good things out there that has been in the past. We've got a lot of good ideas or suggestions that people have.
It
Go
beats
ahead.
the hell out of these statutes and codes, though. And they're going to basically be running on common law as far as I can tell.
Well, you know what common law technically is, don't you?
Yeah, it's people's law. It's case law. Most of it, but a lot of it.
It's a case law for a judge to decide.
For gentrified.
It's for a judge to decide. It's case law for a judge to decide. And I've got that federal law.
It's not. Well, you're talking. There's different kinds of case law. You're talking about their case law, and we got common law type case law. They also call they call case law common law in in the statutes, statutory law. But we don't. When we say case common law, that's just part of the order. The common law is just people's law. You make your argument up there in front of them jurors or them judges, and whatever you can persuade that court, to believe is what they will decide on, and the rest of it would be damned.
Yeah, no, that's true. I know, and that's the problem that we want to get away from, and that's why I'm looking at this ballot measure that to make sure that. Go ahead.
That's also a nice check. It's a double-edged sword, but it's also a nice check against any kind of bad laws or anything else. You need that. The people make the final arbiters. What's right and what's wrong. And the hell with the laws. There's a lot of bad laws out there. And that's the beauty of it. When that jury can override anything that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Except the Constitution.
The judge too.
Yeah, you can override the judge.
Yes, and that's the one thing that pissed me off because in 1988, when my brother-in-law was accidentally shot or murdered up here, they got rid of the juries up here in Oregon completely, primarily. So a judge runs everything. And so my brother, we never even knew the truth with my brother was actually murdered or accidentally shot. See, we didn't get the truth on it, and that's what pisses me off.
It says you have a right to trial by impartial jury, and if you waive your rights, you get to judge. You didn't waive it. Now, if he wasn't there to defend himself, somebody should have come in there, and said, we don't waive no rights. We want an impartial jury, and don't let them railroad you.
Yeah, I know that. Anyhow, I just gave you her own words, so you've got her own statement.
All right.
So I'm not.
I don't like the lady that much. She's very smart, but I don't trust her. She's got a lot. She's very vindictive, and I'll leave it at that. And I'll let you know.
That's a true statement.
Bye-bye.
So, but also too, don't forget that she's also too even publicized that she's taken a blood oath to the Vatican. So anyhow, anybody else would like to bring something in?
I would like to state that we the people can abolish any law except a law that derives itself from the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The statute, codes, and administration. And that's the one thing that we got to start doing in our areas, writing these things up. That's why I was looking at doing a petition, which I don't like doing petitions, to tell you the truth. And I got to figure that one out because I am not a registered voter, nor will I be a registered voter. Because I know as a registered voter, as the law completely and clearly states, it's very simple. It is very simple. The law completely states that, brain fart, I started reading something and lost my attention. And I need to post that up because I noticed that Republic of Texas is having a gathering coming up here, and we need to get that posted. I'll get that posted here right now, too, because people need to start paying attention to what's going on in their area, what's going on across the country. And, and Texas technically is still their own country. which I don't get it because they made a call into Russia to back them up because they were going to succeed, and they never followed through. So I still don't comprehend what, why, and how that happened. And you know what I'm talking about there, don't you? John? Is he still here? I guess not. So, but anyhow, there's a lot of things that have happened around our countries, around, and then in California, they're still trying to convince us people that we still need to just shut up and go along with what our public servants are saying. Dunes just sent me an email on that one, and I'm going to be responding to that one myself tonight. And this is the one thing that when you get these emails from these elected and public servants that are saying stuff, and by the way, John, I wasn't picking on you too, but when we get these letters from the elected and public servants, we need to make sure not only we send speaking against it to them, but we need to make sure that we pass it around to everybody else that we know, so it gets around like lightning, so people get to know how to stop these things and stop the structure of these terrorist organizations. And that's what these people are, you know, and that is the one structure that people need to realize this stuff. And so, and then, you know, like I said, I mean, I did put up Ann's letter, and I'll put it up on all of our sites again. You know, I mean, I don't really, you know, go after them. The only thing with Ann is that I know that she's been involved putting in the packages out there with her and her associate, putting packages out there and having people spending $500 on her package. So that way she gets you in the 192 program and gets you in Social Security, use your straw man account to write off your debt, your mortgages and stuff like that. And it's like I asked her at one point, I want to see the proof. You know, I'm tired of people doing this stuff, and everybody who does this ends up in jail. And so that's the one thing, you know, we're not supporting this stuff to put people in jail. That is the whole point. We're not supposed to be, you know, terrorizing our own neighbors or our own children. And that's the one thing that people just don't get this. And, you know, when people don't pay attention to what's going on, that's the problem that we're losing so much. So much. And don't forget, when Woodrow Wilson signed the Owen Glass Act, you know, this is one thing that when they put in the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, that was his famous statement how he destroyed the country when he put the Banking Act through. If he didn't put the Banking Act through, the birth certificate, bonds, and none of that would have ever been in existence. You know, so that is the one thing that we've got to pay attention to these things when these people do these crazy things. Because these people do things that are, you know, for their own personal gain. You know, so it's like that's the one thing that people don't look at the whole circumstances around them, what's going on. And so one thing is that, like I said, there is a meeting coming up. The Republic of Texas is having a gathering in Crosby, Texas, Saturday, August 11th, 2018, at the American Legion Post 658. And apparently what's going to be participating is 14890 FM radio station. So this is the one thing that, you know, if you're over there in Texas, pay attention to these things too. We've got a lot of people we know in Texas, and so we have to do this. We have to start paying attention. But the one thing I try to recommend to people, keep religion out of these things. Religion is not a political thing. Religion is your own personal thing. You have the right to freedom of religion. Doesn't mean that I want to hear your religion. There's a lot of people who don't believe in Christianity. And have you noticed in the world population of Christianity, it has totally dropped. Totally dropped. It's dropped 45% just in the last 10 years of their membership. People are getting it. Religion is not for us. You know, like I said, I preach native because native law gives us rights. The others don't. And so we got to pay attention to these circumstances. And it's up to us to do that. That is the main point. We have to do this stuff. And anyhow, I'm not, that's a tough one to post. I don't like posting religion stuff, but go ahead.
I'm just looking at petitions, and you know what the CFR is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Code of Federal Regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the only laws that I can see on petitions. So technically, by what I'm seeing, petitions are for the corporation, not for lawful bloodline Americans.
That's true. That's true. But the only way to wake up some of the general public, so we got to look at waking up some of the general public, because you know that's the other way. We got to do certain stupidity things to wake up the general public, because most people are that stupid.
Well, requirements and recommendations for petitions: 1, be written in the English language; 2, contain the name and address of the petitioner; 3, indicate the product or products regulated under the Consumer Product Safety Act; 4, set forth facts which establish the claim that the instance, amendment, or revocation of the rule is necessary; 5, contain an explicit request to initiate commission rulemaking and set forth a brief description. I am not seeing anything that says you have to be registered yourself.
Okay, I want to get out of that one.
You want me to send you this page then?
Yeah, because like I said, I've done ballot title or petitions before in the past when I recalled the school board, which I recalled all school board members. And that was back in 2002. I recalled all 5 school board members. And so, I mean, those things do happen where you can recall a government body. And so that is the one thing when it comes down to recalling a government body. And that was the other thing that frustrated me with that was clearly, I mean, we were supposed to have criminal charges. We proved by the recall, my guesstimate was, well, we were able to prove $30 million that was unaccounted for, embezzled, with an estimate of $150 million. And that was just over an 8-year period of time. So $150 million over an 8-year period of time, if we were able to get all the paperwork and, you know, prove one way or the other or what it is. But $30 million, you figure that this is how they're filtering stuff out of the system. And then when you have a bank director that is, what is that? The bank director, he is on the school board and the funding is going through his bank. So that is the one thing that people need to really realize that this stuff does happen. And so it is paying attention to these things of what's going on in your area.
If anybody wants to know what I had researched, it is 16 CFR Part 1051. Now remember, we're talking laws normally. This is considered a code of federal regulation. Codes, regulations, administrative rules, and everything like that is the corporation. Law is with the Constitution. The regulation I found was 16 CFR Part 1051, and if you want to research it yourself, go for it. And then you can read up on what a petition is, how to use it, and what their requirements are.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ed. Sorry, I just wanted to be clear and not just
No, that's
spout
fine.
stuff
That's
out.
the whole point. That is the whole point. You know, it is clarifying these things. That is what we're supposed to be doing. And that is the one thing that, we are blessed that people are paying attention. They are getting it out, And so that is the one thing that working together on these things. This is how we accomplish things. This is how we are looking at the future. This is how we're making sure that we actually have things that, not only for us, but, for the children. That is the one thing that without that, there is no future. There's no bloodline. There's no structure. And so that's the one thing, too. Like I said, and everybody keeps going, well, the Constitution ain't yours. Well, then if none of it's ours, then what the heck? We don't need business in our country. We don't need any of this collective stuff in our country. That's just simple. We don't need it. So when we stop playing these games with each other, we'll get a lot further ahead. And it's sad that so many people play these political games. And a lot of people play more political games than people realize. But a lot of people are just self-centered and they're out for themselves. They're not out for anybody else. And that's the other sad point. Because too many people are just me, instead of us. Because, I can comprehend me. It's like when I'm growing vegetables or my raspberries or my strawberries and stuff like that. Yeah, it's me. If I want to give some away, that's up to me. I shouldn't be forced. And also, too, the law says, we've got a law that I put out. It clearly states, what's yours is yours and is yours, not somebody else's, nobody else's. So that's the one thing that people have got to realize these things. The Supreme Court has already made that decision. We are not a religious organization. Supreme Court clarified that in 1829. We are not a religious organization, and we're not to share. We don't have a right, or we're not to be forced to share our food, vegetables, and stuff like that, or have the government come in and take our food and stuff either. They don't have a right to come in our home and take our food or anything. And that is the one thing that people have got to get that through their head. So and that's the one thing. These public officials, they're just IRS agents. And so when they're doing that and they're out there, running around and not doing their public service duty, the original contract, that's one thing that has to be done. That these things have to be done. And so, it takes a collective of us people to do. Oh, God damn it, computer! It takes a collective of us to do this stuff. And when we're doing that, when I get this other measure out or this deal out for the states and the counties, and I'll make sure that John and everybody else gets a copy too. Those things need to be filed in your area. You need to ask your senator, your congressman. You want them to sign it. You want to make sure when you send a copy of it out, it goes to your local media. That's the one thing you really want it to go to your local media. You want to see if your media is going to print it. You want to see if your media is going to participate in it. Because, that's the one thing without the local media, without their participating sometimes, and it's hard to get the local media to participate because I've had owners of newspapers, and I'm not talking just small newspapers. I'm talking, owners that own, 13, 20 newspapers that tell me point blank, Ed, I can't write that, put it in the paper. If I do that, they'll jerk my license. I'll be out of business. And I'm going, well, that's a sad day. That's a hard deal. When you're being threatened by the media, the public servants unions, and tell them if you don't, if you write the truth, you're going to lose your license. You're going to be out of business. And these men and women actually do get threatened that way. So that's the one thing is paying attention to what these public employees are doing to people in your area, people in your community. And that's why it's so important to file these criminal charges. Because, see, if you just file a wham-wham complaint without an affidavit of criminal charges backing up the real facts, what are we doing? So it has to have a real fact, a real participation, and real evidence. That's what I did when I did the recall on the school board. I produced the evidence. They flipped out because I was able to get the evidence because, I was on the local school committee. That's why Kate Brown's bill killed the local school committees in the Oregon state. Because the local school committees actually had lawful authority over the school board, the school district, and the finances. The school committee members did. That's why Oregon State got rid of it. I got the recall done November and 2000, and then 2003 by, April, May, March, April, May. Yeah, it was May, June. That's when they got rid of the local school committees in the state of Oregon. 2003, right after I successfully did the school board. And I was a laughing stock when I told them I was going to recall the school board. I was attacked by senators and congressmen. I was being, basically a public joke up at the building because, you're gonna recall us, and that ain't gonna happen. And let me tell you, when I recalled them, that shocked the heck out of them. They couldn't believe it happened. There was a lot of other words that were used around. And yes, we do have these rights, not privileges, but we have to enforce them. They're not going to enforce them. And that's the one thing that people say, well, would you expect them to enforce their law on another judge, arrest another judge and stuff? Well, they do sometimes. And that's the one thing that when a judge gets arrested and gets convicted of a charge, they can't be a judge, they can't be a lawyer anymore. And that's the one thing that some of these people have been getting away with. And that's where we need to, when we find these things out, file the criminal charges and put the right affidavits together and make sure that we stop that stuff. And that's our responsibility to the children of the next generation. I mean, I'm sort of terrified for the country for the next, for definitely coming up, because most people don't have a concept, don't have a clue of what the next generation, the kids, are going to do, because they don't have proper education. They don't know the Constitution. They don't know the Republican form of government, and they sure don't know, our history. That's the saddest part. The schools have failed. And it's not just in Oregon they failed. It's all across the country failed. So that's the one thing that we need to start standing up and making sure that these things get apparent out there, so we're not sitting there for the next generation. And that means, don't forget, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. This is the frustration we are living with. And so, and I'm not all into the townships and all this that people want to do. That's going back to the original British colonies and the original British structure of England. The township had its own marshal, or, probably, what do they call that, sheriff back then. It was called the sheriff back then. And that way, if you don't do what the community tells you to do, if you wanted to paint your house purple with red trim, you couldn't do it in a township, because the township gets to decide what you're going to do with your property. And so, and that depends on your neighbors too in a township. What are your neighbors going to do? How are they going to handle what you're doing on your property? And so that's the other point that, no disrespect to people out there on that. But trust me, I've got the research on that. I've got friends of mine that have been trying to convince me of that for the last 30 years, literally. And I keep telling them, well, if this happens in a township, and they go, well, people won't allow that to happen. And when somebody tells me that people ain't going to allow that to happen in their own town, I know better, because most people are willing to sell their soul for anything. So when people tell me it ain't going to happen, that's why I like the Constitution. The Republican form of government says no injured party, no property damage. The rest of the stuff is bullshit. You can't go out there and slander somebody. You can't go out there and assault somebody. You can't go out there and attack somebody. So, and that's the one thing that we need to pay attention to these things, so that way and to educate the next generation so they're not going to be doing it to their children and grandchildren. But that's a hard thing to do. That really is a hard thing to do today. We don't know what the future's going to hold. The one thing is we don't know the future. To a degree, we don't. We see what's coming down the pike. We see what people have been doing. But the saddest part is that these kids don't get proper education. I remember the days where, we learned. Of course, back then in school, most of some of us, we didn't pay attention. Who gives a shit, I went to work when I was young. I didn't need school. I needed a job. And then later on in life, now I'm realizing back then compared to now, well, I should have paid attention a little bit more then. I would have been a lot further on knowledge or stuff already prepared and been done if I would have paid attention a little bit more back then. But, that's the one thing that, life is a learning experience. So sometimes we don't learn what we think we learn, and sometimes we do. So anyhow, that's just a thought on that one. So, but anyhow, anybody else got anything else they would like to add? No? Okay. Well, why don't we just call it an evening then, because it's 7:06 or let's just say 7 o'clock. So why don't we call it an evening, and and we enjoyed the conversation. I got some information out to you on that too. And that's the point. We're not supposed to be arguing about semantics. We're supposed to be putting things together. And so it's like, and I do cautious people, when it comes to people trying to get you into writing off your debts and that type of stuff. Until we know the truth, don't get caught up in stuff like that, because if you do get caught up in stuff like that, that's what might end up in jail. I've talked to many, many people that says they've got the numbers on this stuff. They can make these things happen. And I've always questioned them. I keep asking them, prove it. I want to go through your process. I want to see that, I want you to walk me through it. Show me by my hand. Oh, it's going to cost you $500.
You can go through my process, but it's going to cost you $599.95. Get it today.
Yeah, and these are the same people who are bitching about the debt note. These are some of the same people that are saying we need to kill the Treasury tomorrow. We don't need a de facto dollars, but these are people that are trying to convince people to destroy their lives, because if the de facto dollar ends tomorrow, how do you expect to buy groceries tomorrow? You don't have a garden. Most of us don't have a real watering system. Most people don't have a well with 25,000 gallons of water for their home. You figure a minimum 15,000 gallons a year just to get you through, because you figure the average house uses 3,000 to 5,000, 7,000 gallons a month. So you got to incorporate your thoughts when you think about these things. When you say, we need to get this done, and we need to end this, and we need to stop that. So when people don't think about those things, that's where we lose. That's where we're losing right now, because sometimes people don't think before they speak. And if they actually thought before they spoke, we would have half the problems we have today. And that's the one thing that people don't realize. We would actually have half the problems. So anyhow, with that, I guess we'll call it an evening. We thank everybody for joining us tonight. We thank people. Sometimes we have difference of opinions or knowledge, but that's the best thing, that we still are here. We're still communicating. We're still working on these things. So with that, may the Great Spirit bless you. May Mother Earth feed you, take care of you, and also, too, the Creator take care of you and your family.
Thank you very much, Ed. It's currently July 29th, 2018, and it's a Sunday. Thank you very much for listening to Education by Ed. Now catch us on next Saturday with disclaimers by Ed.